Well, folks, this was definitely quite the follow up from yesterday's episode. Now, as I put in the title for my episode 90 review, are Martin's what was I think I posed the question, are Martin's troubles really over or are they just beginning? I think is what I said. And now we're dealing with the family fallout of the secret coming to light. So thankfully, it only took 90 episodes. Okay, technically less than 90, but close enough for us to finally know what went down the night from 2 years ago. But before we get into that, like I said, hey, even though Tyler Perry's Sisters does come back, and you know, if you follow me on my main channel, Our Kind of Entertainment, typically I follow the shows that bring in the most views and whatnot. Hey, ad revenue, I got bills, folks. But don't think that the return of Sisters means that I'm going to neglect my Beyond the Gates duties. So, yeah, that's why I'm getting this episode review out now, because Sisters comes on later tonight at 9 o'clock. So, I know that next week is the mid-season finale of Divorce Sisters. So this week and next week I have 3 shows to review, but then after that it's only down to 2. 5 episodes of Beyond the Gates per week, 1 episode of Sisters. So that should be able to balance things out. Now, with that being said, let's try to get this video over 1,000 views, because I think episode 90 is close to 1,000, so that's good. But yeah, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's jump in. So Anita, with again the stylist behind the scenes, great job with the hair. Anita comes home and it looks like things with the articulates are just over and done with. And like I said in my Friday episode review, if you had these 2 ungrateful heifers, barking at you about taking over when you're coming out of your own pocket to make sure you're pressed, dressed, and ready to go when it's time to go on stage, I would have been done too. And she's ignoring a text message and wonders where her husband is. And then we go over to the diner, and Bill tells Martin and Vernon about the fact that, oh yeah, the good old busboy was killed in a robbery that went wrong. Now, Martin, you can calm down. Your problems are over. But neither of them can believe what happened because of the fact that Martin almost burned down his whole life by doing his press conference, and the guy who was causing so much trouble just randomly dies in a robbery situation, which honestly makes 0 sense considering, the whole blackmail and stuff like that. So that's a weak cover story, Bill. But hey, he just says, don't worry about it, it's been handled. And then from there, Martin starts to put 2 and 2 together like, wait a minute, that picture of him lying out on the ground dead, that just happened at the perfect moment when I was about to confess on at the podium during the press conference. So what in the world's going on? And then Bill says, look, it's a coincidence. You know how life has a funny way of surprising you, and hey, things work out in sometimes the most surprising ways. So with that being said, that dark cloud, that shadow that's been cast over your life, let it go. You can move forward. So at this point, the looming disaster is over, and you can go back to living your life without any sort of nightmares or fear. But the thing is, Martin doesn't think that his nightmare... Well, basically, he doesn't feel like his conscience will be eased until he actually makes a public confession, which at this point I feel like is incredibly stupid, but whatever. So he's sure that the picture showing up was no coincidence and that Bill needs to tell him what's what. But yet again, Bill's like, look, slow your roll, let it go. But kind of like what Vanessa was doing to Joey in yesterday's episode, the longer he stood there and sat with the situation, he was able to assess exactly what happened, including the fact that that detective probably bumped off, Kenneth once and for all. And he's interrupted when the journalist asked about why was the press conference canceled, and he's like, yeah, sorry, there's a private matter that just occurred, and he basically leads him out of the diner. So then he complains that Bills took away his chance to come clean. Martin, I call cap on that because I look at it from the perspective of Eva, where she had countless opportunities to either privately introduce herself to Ted as his daughter and or did something that would prevent Leslie's plan at the anniversary party from happening. But what did she do? She waited until the last possible moment after she escaped from the storage closet that her mom locked her in to say, no, you got to get out of here now. And then that's when Kat rightfully called her out. It's like, you don't get to just make some sort of last second declaration of, hey, there's danger, when you've had plenty of time to do that beforehand and you were part of the danger in the first place. I feel the same way about Martin. Like, if you wanted to come clean about this, you would have and should have done it a long time ago, or at the very least shared what went down with your husband. That's essentially what I'm looking at now. So for Martin to have this attitude, the only time I found his attitude like, okay, I definitely see where he's coming from, was when he was told by the powers that be, his grandfather, his father, Bill, Elon, Marcel, Joey, basically all these people who said, hey, we'll handle it, stay out of it. But then they dropped the ball, and then his family got involved, his kids and whatnot. That attitude was justified. But at this point, it's like, nah, man, you need to just chill. So that's when Martin, just leaves in a huff, and then Vernon gets angry with Bill, and I gotta admit, I'm on Bill's side here, because Vernon's like, look, I thought we agreed to pay him off. And yet again, like Bill said, like, that's not going to work, especially due to the failed murder attempt by Randy. So at this point, paying him off, it didn't work in the past, and obviously it's not going to work now. He's just going to come back at some point to get more money. So he's fixed the problem, so what's the issue? And Vernon's like, hey, don't forget who holds the power around here. And it's funny because Bill's clapback was like, okay, if that's the case, just remember that the next time you call me to bail you and your family out. So from there, we go over to the booth where Joey and Vanessa are at. And she wants to know, like, okay, what was all this about? But Joey just tells her, like, you don't want to know. But she's really trying to find out, like, what's the dirt? But the thing is, he does give a little bit of breadcrumbs in terms of a very bad man need to be disposed of. And he notices how living on the edge gets her hot and bothered. But at the same time, it's like, look, just, you don't want to know too much about the rules of the dangerous games that get played around here. Now, from there, that's when the good detective shows up. And Vanessa oversteps by asking about disposal in terms of his job, title. But that's when the detective's like, I don't know what you see in this woman. And then Vanessa decides to, clap back. And that's when Joey's like, come on now. Don't push the line, because, your evening might not end up too nice if you do. So from there, the detective's like, hey, job's done. Then he leaves. And at this point, I believe Joey and Vanessa are the only ones left in the diner. And then they start making out. And I'm like, not on the booth. People eat there. So we go over to the country club. Bill comes in for a drink, and then that's when Danny basically does to Bill what she did to Ashley and Andre on the first date. She just plops down, and that's when it's like, oh, just the last person I need to see right now. Now, that's when Danny talks about how, oh, what's this about, me upsetting your wife, and how, that's got her all in a huff, and you're mad at me. But the thing is, she knows her ex, and based off the way Bill came up in the country club, she knows that he's glad that she's there for him to talk to. But basically he says, like, look, you take being wrong to just incredibly new levels. And then he goes in about Vernon, giving him a good tongue lashing with his words earlier. But the thing is, even though we may have complimented each other back in the day, there's no more of that going on. So then we go over to the annoying kids. Martin and Smitty's house. And they're all just on edge waiting for Martin to show up again. And remember, Smitty packed his bags in the last episode. So they're waiting for essentially family fallout. And, they're wondering if it's just going to be an all-out war of words, or will they actually be able to talk it out? So um, that's when Smitty gets a call on his phone, and he gives the kids their phones and sends them upstairs. So from there, his boss actually calls about the impromptu press conference that was called, but then got canceled. Yet there's no update on why it was canceled. So now, like, what in the world can Martin be caught up in now? And then that's when the kids come back downstairs and assume that Smitty got a call about, Pop. And that's when Martin walks in on cue and sees his bags are packed, and he's like, look, can I just explain? And then Smitty, rightfully exhausted from all of the secrets and the lies and comforting Martin during the nightmares, yet he doesn't tell him about anything. So he's just tired of being a doormat and just shoved to the side whenever Martin, wants to blow him off, essentially. But that's when Martin's like, you know what? Hey, you and the kids all deserve better, and the secret's in tonight. And that's when Smitty's like, okay, we're listening. But the thing is, Martin wants to talk to Smitty alone, but Smitty insists that, hey, everybody in this room deserves to know what's going on. But Samantha, actually being smart, is like, hey, you know what? Terrell and I will go back upstairs. You two just talk it out. So from there, they give Martin a hug, which was a nice little moment. And that's when Martin just apologizes again. And that's when Smitty is like, got some bass in his voice. I don't want apologies. I want you to tell the truth. And then we have a good flashback, because it turns out that this is taking place when Vernon and Martin are coming back from some sort of political meeting, and they took a wrong turn in Albuquerque. Just kidding. But as they're on a country road, there's a flat tire, and Martin goes out to change it. And that's when two white men in a truck pull up and start threatening them. And that's when Vernon's like, he'll call the police, and Martin flinches and just smashes one of them in the face with a tire iron. And then the other person lunges at Vernon, and Martin beat that person to death with a tire iron until Vernon pulled him off, like, hey, stop. So at this point, Kenneth was knocked unconscious and his brother was dead. And the thing is, it's just one of those situations where Smitty is rightfully shocked about what happened. And he's like, well, the incident was only the start, because at that point, Grandpa called Detective Malone and Elon. And they covered everything up and sent me home. And it's basically, I snuffed this man's life out like it was nothing. From there, Smitty's like, so what? You just silenced the witnesses? And Martin went into detail that, Grandpa and everybody else took care of it, and I just went along with it, even after Joey got brought into the mess. So Smitty's like, that's how the detective's bank account got that huge amount in there 2 years ago. It was some sort of inheritance, as he was using as cover story. So at that point, that's when Martin says that what happened that night, something snapped inside of me when I saw that white man put his hands on my grandpa. And I can't believe I did what I did, and I just couldn't stop myself. Now, here's my thing. If I were a guessing, I am a guessing guy. That's what I do. That's my job. I would say something along the lines of, look at how Martin idolizes his grandpa and all the barriers that, Vernon was on the front lines of helping tear down for the next generation. And no doubt, all the stories of, the civil rights leaders and whatnot. And you just think about police brutality back then with the dogs and the hoses, and, from there, just the racist white people from the church burnings and all this other stuff. So you can only imagine what it would have been like for Martin to see the man he idolized getting grabbed on by some racist white dude who intended harm. So at that point, he just kind of snapped. That's how I look at it. So Smitty, is very sympathetic, and, they hug it out. And that's when Martin goes into detail about that Kenny, the Kenneth guy, the survivor, and how it turns out his dad was the one that gave him plastic surgery to, bring his face back to normal. And he got a payoff to leave the country, but he came back. So from there, Smitty is shocked because of the fact that Kenny has been around for weeks, and he's upset that he was kept in the dark about the situation. But Martin's like, well, I wanted one of us to remain innocent and pure for the sake of our kids, as opposed to both of us carrying this weight around. But then they go back and forth about, Martin not telling the truth those 2 years ago. And Martin was like, well, I thought my grandpa handled all this. So Smitty is upset, and Kenny could have gone after their kids. So, it's one thing about being left in the dark, but the fact that their kids were put in danger because of this secret is what pissed him off. And that's when Martin counters that, well, I wasn't happy that, you confronted him. And that's when Smitty retorts like, well, when I did, Martin, he says he was the villain. And that's when Martin's like, well, maybe he was right. And that's when Smitty goes in on him about failing the family and everything. And Martin drops the bar about how what happened that night was a reaction, but everything that occurred after that was just a bad choice. So that's when Smitty says that he would never have gone along with the cover-up. And from there, he's disappointed that Martin should have put his loyalty in him above Vernon. And I don't know. I'm iffy on that. But then again, I'm not married, so I guess spouse over family, I get that, but I feel like there's gray areas when it comes to certain situations. But how do you feel about it? Do you think Martin should have told Smitty about what occurred 2 years ago? But then again, I get why Smitty is upset, because the ramifications of what went down 2 years ago, the ghost of what occurred has come back to haunt them, and it put their kids in danger. That's pretty much how it went down. So, I don't know. But yeah, Martin is like, look, well, the danger's over with. It doesn't matter, because of the fact that Kenny's dead at this point. So that's when we switch over to Anita and Vernon, because Vernon gets home and he's just relieved that, his wife is there, and he asked about the articulates, and he's like, wait a minute, something's wrong. And that's pretty much how that ends, except for the fact that he admits that the night from 2 years ago that we never talk about came back, and now Martin is pretty much drowning in what happened with that. But yeah, so interesting way to cut off the episode, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm giving this one a solid 9 out of 10, mainly for the fact that we finally know exactly what went down those 2 years ago, and we get the family fallout from that. So with that being said, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video.